Good morning, everyone. We are going to get started in just a minute. I'm just giving folks another minute or two to hop on. I see we've had a bunch of people join in the past 30 seconds or so I'll just give people another minute or so to hop on, and then we can go ahead and get started. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for taking the time this morning to come to our webinar. We're going to be talking about non-GMO project verification, as I'm sure you all know. Just a little bit more in depth about what we'll be doing. So I'm Lucy Anderson from SCS Global Services. I am the program manager of our non-GMO project program here at SCS. And I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about SCS, and then I'm going to pass it over to Kira from the Non-GMO Project, who will also be presenting with me today to talk about a little bit about the Non-GMO Project and some marketing resources they have for you. And then I will be going a little bit more in depth into some frequently asked questions about the Non-GMO Project verification process, ingredients, a little bit more technical, and kind of walking you through the process. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So just a little bit of information about myself and about SCS. So as I mentioned, I'm the program manager for our non-GMO project program. And I also work in other programs at SCS, including USDA organic and gluten-free certification. So SCS offers all sorts of different third-party environmental certifications. We do some standards development, but we are all over the place in terms of the services that we offer, everything from food and agriculture to materials for buildings to chain of custody forestry audits. So we do all auditing, testing, certifications and verifications, as well as training and some consulting as well. And we've been doing this for about 35 years now. And we are doing these services all over the world, not just in the United States. So as I mentioned here on the right, there's a bunch of different services that we offer and areas in which we specialize. And we're really looking to promote sustainable decision-making and policies in every sector of the economy around the world by helping folks get on a path towards continuous improvement, towards sustainability, and also recognizing achievements of organizations who are going above and beyond and trying to achieve high levels of performance in environmental protection, social responsibility, and quality. So here are a couple of the food and agriculture oriented services that we offer. And this is just a subset of what we do offer. And as I mentioned, we are involved in other services as well. But obviously, as you're interested in non-GMO project verification, you're likely involved in food manufacturing. So we also do a bunch of food safety auditing like SQF, Global Gap, Primus, BRC, as well as some more socially oriented standards, and as well as things like USDA organic and gluten-free. I specialize in non-GMO project USDA organic and gluten-free, but we have work in all of these different services listed here, as well as many others in the food and ag sector. And I will now pass it over to Kira to talk a little bit about the Non-GMO Project history, market position, and marketing resources that she has for you.
Awesome, thank you, Lucy. I'm really excited to be presenting in conjunction with one of our technical administrators, SCS Global Services. So thanks for doing this together, Lucy, it's great. I am Kira Heyman, and I work on the client experience team at the Non-GMO Project. And I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit more about our program with you today, as well as some more information about how we work with food manufacturers like you all to really shift the non-GMO supply chain and give consumers the verified choices that they're looking for when they shop for the butterfly. So a little bit of history about us. The Non-GMO Project was founded in 2007 by a consortium of retailers to provide non-GMO choices for consumers. And that still continues to be the core of what we do, educating about the non-GMO movement and also about ensuring that there are verified choices on the marketplace. Since then, we've grown to support over 3,000 verified brands that represent over 50,000 products. It's pretty big. And that runs everywhere from the CPG products you see in the supermarket all the way up to inputs and ingredients that are in those product formulations as well. So it spans the supply chain. And the Non-GMO Project Verified Seal remains one of the fastest growing sectors today. And our integrity is rooted in two things: the rigorous nature of our standard and also the third-party piece of our work. So we work as the Non-GMO Project, the nonprofit that owns and sets the standard, and then we partner with folks like SCS Global Services that actually carry out the product evaluation. And that really helps bring transparency to the work that we're doing. Oops. There we go. Since we first started verifying products, we've seen a huge growth in the butterfly seal. So in 2011, we were about 1.3 billion in annual retail sales. This is data coming from SPINS. And today you can see in 2020, we're well over 31 billion. And we continue to grow. And I want to talk to you a little bit about why and how you can get involved in this. So why do businesses and food manufacturers get involved in non-GMO project verification? So firstly, brands that promote their non-GMO project commitment can see anywhere from 15 to 20% of a sales lift, sometimes higher, depending on the product. But that data is also coming from SPINS, and that's a huge incentive for folks. In addition, your non-GMO commitment and demonstrating that to your consumers is a really, really strong way to build your brand. You're helping to build a better, more transparent food system, one that specifically relies less on damaging industrial inputs, such as chemical herbicides and synthetic pesticides. And telling that story to your consumer can be pretty powerful. You're also part of a growing industry. So the natural products industry has gone from 11% of total market share in 2010 to 18% in 2020, and it continues to grow. The Non-GMO Project did some pretty cool consumer market research this spring. We partnered with a research firm out of Chicago called Linkage. Some of you may know them. And we wanted to better understand who the butterfly shopper is. We wanted to know why they're shopping for verified choices, what other seals are they interested in, what do they say they care about when they're looking for food at the market. And we found some pretty interesting things. So I'm excited to be able to share some of those insights with you today. 54% of North American consumers recognize non-GMO project verification, and 51% of those say it's important when deciding what foods to buy. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into that in the next slide, but that's significant. And 88% of those consumers are willing to pay a premium, 10 to 15%, for non-GMO project verified choices. So people who recognize the seal care about it, and they're willing to put their money where their mouth is, you know? And then we'll talk a little bit more about the values alignment as well. So 85% of non-GMO project verified consumers believe farming practices and food production methods impact environmental health and biodiversity, and 94% believe that the quality of food is a critical factor in their health and wellness. So again, communicating those messages through the seals that you put on your package, like the butterfly, is really important. Okay, so here you see a smattering of common eco labels that you'll find on the back or front of product packaging. And we looked at a couple of different things here. So first, at recognition, how many of the consumers, I think we looked at 2,000 consumers for this survey, how many consumers recognize the seal? Among those, how many find it to be important? And then overall value that they find in each of these seals as well. So you can see that USDA Organic and Non-GMO Project Verification are really far ahead of the group. They're the ones that are the most recognizable. The story gets interesting is when you look at the next line, among those aware, the importance level for the Non-GMO Project really shoots up and goes beyond that of organic. So again, that's that stat that people who are aware of the Non-GMO Project Butterfly really care about making a choice that matters to them, their health, and the environment. And that's pretty important. Some other interesting data here, and we won't spend too much more time on this slide in particular, but it's interesting. Some of the less recognizable, more niche certifications, such as glyphosate-free or Demeter or biodynamic, the ones who aren't super recognized, actually have a pretty strong following. So people who are dedicated to looking for biodynamic products really go for it there too. And there's some other interesting insights we can dive into here. And if you're interested, I can share a full deep dive on our market research via link after this webinar. So that's a little bit about why consumers are interested and consumers are driving growth of the non-GMO project space. But retailers are also an important stakeholder. As many of you know, retailers and distributors are looking for differentiation in the products that they source, particularly around attributes like non-GMO. So this is an example of Range Me. They're an online product discovery platform that's used by big brands like, big retailers like Whole Foods, Thrive Market, Safeway for product discovery. And since January 2020, Non-GMO Project verified brands have been searched and used that filter over 150,000 times. So it really helps to set your products apart when you're able to jump on board with a program like this. Cool, so that is a little bit about the value proposition for non-GMO from the consumer or retailer side. And I want to talk a little bit about what the Non-GMO Project offers when you join our program. So once you come into the Non-GMO Project program and you work with your technical administrator to demonstrate compliance with your products, we'll welcome you with open arms when you get your first verified products and share with you the trademarks. And then we want to help you promote that commitment. So first off, we'll be able to link your verified listing to our website along with your logo and a link directly again to your website so that you can have maximum exposure. We're going to work with you and offer our communications guide to help you craft your message and tell your story about what it means to you to be Non-GMO Project verified, again, connecting with consumers. We'll ensure that we're looking at your logo placement and making sure that's all squared away and ready to go. Something that I'm really excited about is optional training for your sales teams, and that can be really, really valuable. We can help to educate your sales teams around some of the information that I just shared so that they can go ahead and share that value proposition with your buyers, which is pretty cool. Every October, we host annual Non-GMO Month, where we work directly with retailers to promote verified products in store. And that has recently, I mean, it's October, but it's been very successful this year with lots of, especially social media traffic, given the nature of shopping these days. But yeah, we would love to help promote your verified products through our retailer networks in the month of October. And then we also work really hard to bring consumer awareness and education as well. And this year, during 2020, we're doing a hashtag Be the Butterfly campaign. We're working to educate consumers on what GMOs are, why it's important to have options when it comes to your food and your food systems. And that's been going pretty well too. And again, that social media aspect has been quite fun for us. A new offering that we have that we encourage as many brands to take us up on as want to is Brand Wednesday. And that is, again, it's a social media campaign where we highlight a different brand every week. And we can help develop content, take photos, and really share your story with our over 1.3 million social followers. And again, that content obviously is yours to share too, but we want to just promote the heck out of what you've done with your good efforts in getting verified. So yeah, that's all included when you join our program. And then I want to talk a little bit more about going above and beyond with our marketing services. We offer a portfolio of choices and a la carte option for any different way that you might want to work with our master marketing team to help promote your non-GMO commitment. I already talked a little bit about a free offering of Brand Wednesday to promote across social platforms. We also offer different options with our newsletters, which can be really, really fruitful. Both our consumer newsletter, which you see a snapshot of here, and our retailer newsletters have really good open rates. I think our consumer newsletter goes to over 10,000 people with about a 30% open rate. And the retailer newsletter goes to 3,400 engaged retailers who are looking for non-GMO Project verified product with a 25% open rate. And our content team will develop this feature with you. Again, that content will be shared with our consumers, our retailers, but it's also available for you to share with your networks and your marketing team. Similarly, we can do something with our Living Non-GMO website. It's our consumer-facing website that gets over about 15,000 unique monthly visitors, and we can do something similar for you there. I think I've talked a lot about social. We can promote the heck out of you and partner on that element as well. And if you're interested, we can help to share your news on the PR Newswire and help you develop the content for a press release about your verification and why that matters to your brand. Of course, logo placement is also something that we can help with in any of these offerings too. But that's kind of an overview of what it is that we're providing for marketing services right now. And I'd love to talk with anyone who does get verified or is verified and would like to leverage your partnership with the Non-GMO Project to amplify your non-GMO message. And I think that brings me, Lucy, to the end of what I've got going on with value proposition and marketing services. And I'll let you take it over from here to chat more about some nuts and bolts of verification.
Perfect. Thanks, Kira.
Yeah, let me. Did that work, Lucy?
Yes, I think so. Can you see my screen now? Should be all set.
We're not seeing your screen.
Oh, not seeing my screen. Okay. Let's see. Oh, I just got the notification. Sorry for the delay, everyone. And as we start going through, so I'm going to talk to you guys about the 5 most frequently asked questions about the verification process, now kind of going more into the nitty-gritty of what verification is, what it entails. I just wanted to encourage folks to put any questions that you have in the questions panel over on the, should be on the right side of your screen at any point. And Kira and I will take some time at the end of this to answer any questions that you have for either me or for her. And I also wanted to let you know that you will be receiving a recording of this webinar in your email shortly after, I believe within a couple days. So you will have a copy of everything that we go over today and this webinar as well. So with that, we can get into the 5 most frequently asked questions that we see as technical administrators of the Non-GMO Project standard. Okay, so the first is what does the verification process look like? What does it entail? And as Kira mentioned, you know, we are one of the technical administrators of the standard. So Kira works for the Non-GMO Project, who creates and maintains the standard, and we are the independent third party who administers the standard. So you will be working very closely with us as the technical administrator to go through the audit process and complete the audit and do the evaluation of all of your ingredients and your systems and your facilities. And so the verification process, really, we explain it really in 2 components. I know there's a lot of steps on here, but you know, it breaks down into 2 kind of main areas. The first is going to be input and ingredient review, and the second being facility review. And I'm going to go much more in depth into both of these components, but just to give you a basic overview of kind of what this verification process looks like in the actual audit. So once you sign on to work with us, we will collect information on your product formulations and then be doing a deep dive review into your ingredients for compliance. And we'll go into kind of what types of ingredients need what types of documentation, how you demonstrate compliance of different types of ingredients later on in this kind of technical nuts and bolts section. But just we do a pretty thorough review of your ingredients, and it almost always involves going back to your ingredient suppliers for more information. Sometimes that information is very limited in scope, and sometimes it's much more detailed in scope, but this generally does involve cooperation from your ingredient suppliers in order to be able to demonstrate your product's compliant. And then the facility component will also be going more in depth into, but we're looking at segregation, traceability, and quality control in your facility, and then potentially an on-site inspection if your operation is engaged in parallel production. And I think kind of taking a step back and talking about, an on-site inspection if necessary, most food-oriented audits do require that on-site inspection, and Non-GMO Project is relatively unique in that not all of the operations do require this on-site inspection. So majority of our clients do not require a facility visit. And I'll go in a little bit more detail about how you determine whether or not you need this facility inspection, but it's triggered by something called parallel processing, which we'll go into review in when we talk a little bit more about what this facility review entails. So the basic two components of the audit that you'll be working through with your auditor are your ingredient review and working with your ingredient suppliers to gather documentation to demonstrate compliance of these different ingredients used in different percentages in your products, and then looking at your systems in place to prevent contamination in your facility, make sure that you can trace all of your finished good product back to the lots of ingredients used in it, segregating anything that's not Non-GMO Project verified in your facility from ingredients and finished good products that are verified, things like that. So those are the two main components of the audit process that you'll work through with us. And so once that's complete, again, it usually entails email back and forth for the majority of the audits, and some phone calls as well. And then if you're required to do that on-site inspection component, we will do that. And then once we kind of have everything we need, your auditor will complete a checklist and submit that for review to one of our technical reviewers. And then that technical reviewer will create a report that consolidates and clarifies any findings if necessary, and then that will lead you to your certification decision. And so that can be either a positive verification decision, which means that you are now Non-GMO Project verified, we've collected everything we need, or if there were some hiccups or issues in the process, we can issue corrective actions. And this can be for, we don't have this documentation yet, or there is something that needs to be resolved before you can be verified. And your reviewer will work through those findings with you, explaining them and explaining why your operation is non-compliant so that you can bring it into compliance. And they do have, you can work through these and get them resolved. So receiving non-compliances is not a deal breaker. It's just a step in the process for most operations. It's saying, okay, most of these things are good. Here are the areas that need to be improved in order for you to become Non-GMO Project verified. And then you get your certification decision. And then this is an annual process. So you go through your renewal every year, similar process where we're reviewing your ingredients and your facility. It does tend to get a little bit more straightforward as folks become more familiar with requirements year over year. And some of the documentation we don't require to be updated every year. If your SOPs in your facility haven't changed, confirmation of that is sufficient as opposed to providing us all new SOPs every single year. So it's an annual process, and your renewal does look relatively similar to your initial review, but we do find they move a little bit faster just due to the fact that people become more familiar with the requirements, and there tend to be a few less during the renewal process. And so how to get started on this process. So you can go ahead and contact Ned, who is our sales manager, and his information will be present later in the slideshow as well. And you'll, again, get a recording of this, so you'll have his information there. But you just can contact us to go ahead and get started. Ned will give you a call, walk you through the process, answer any questions you have about the process, and send over a basic application form and any guidance documents that might be useful to you. And you can submit your application. It's mostly detailing the number of products you have, the types of ingredients you have, and Ned will kind of do a first pass at your ingredients, talk through any potential red flag CCs or any issue CCs or complicated ingredients, and just make sure that you're understanding of the basics of the evaluation. And so after you submit that application, and then we'll give you a free price quote. And then once you kind of sign on with the work order and the contract, we'll kind of dive into the audit, and then you can pay your fees and you are on the way to becoming verified. So after you work with Ned to get through the scoping phase and through this preliminary process, we'll collect your product formulations and start the audit, and start reaching out to some of those ingredient suppliers and evaluating your facility procedures as well. The second most common question that we get are what are the GMO risk levels for ingredients. I mentioned earlier, different types of ingredients have different requirements, and that depends on two things. It depends on their risk level, and it depends on the percentage by weight they are in your finished good product, excluding water and salt. So an ingredient like corn, which is high risk, and we'll go more in detail into what are high risk ingredients, but if you have corn as 18% of your product, that will have different requirements than corn that is 0.18% of your product. Or oats will have a different requirement from corns because they are not considered high risk, and corn is considered high risk. So there's 5 basic risk levels for non-GMO project evaluation. So the first is non-risk. This one's very straightforward. This is non-agricultural ingredients. So salt is an example of a non-risk ingredient. Things that are non-agricultural. So obviously the requirements for those are very minimal, as if there is no DNA in the ingredient, obviously the chance for genetic modification is non-existent, hence the classification of non-risk. And then there's low-risk ingredients, which are ingredients that are not commercially available in a genetically modified form and are not at risk for cross-contamination from commercially available GM crops. So this is most of your agricultural ingredients. And again, I'll go into, it's easier to describe what is high risk as opposed to what is low risk, because most ingredients are going to be considered low risk. Leafy greens, oats, most fruits and vegetables are considered low risk. Monitored risk are ingredients that are not commercially available in genetically modified form, but the Non-GMO Project is keeping a close watch on them because they are either able to be cross-contaminated by commercially available GM crops, or there is significant development underway to make these ingredients genetically modified in a commercially available form. So the Non-GMO Project just keeps a list, and if you just go on and you go to the Non-GMO Project website, or even just on Google, search Non-GMO Project Standard, you'll be able to get a copy of the Non-GMO Project Standard. It's publicly available. And they have, you can see here, monitored risk and high risk inputs are listed out on Appendix C and Appendix B, respectively, of this standard. So you can get a list of what all of these types of ingredients are. And so monitored risk, for the purpose of evaluation, are treated the same and have the same requirements as low risk ingredients, but it's just something to kind of keep an eye on, that there is an elevated risk for these compared to their counterparts that are just low risk. High-risk ingredients are, we're going to go into those a little bit more in depth, but these are ingredients that are commercially available in a genetically modified form. So this is going to be your corn, your soy, etc. And then verified status ingredients are ingredients that are already non-GMO project verified. So this could be something that's high risk, like a corn. So if you receive a corn into your facility that's already non-GMO project verified, it's not going to be subject to the same requirements as an unverified corn that you're receiving in your facility. And verified status can apply to both high risk and low risk ingredients, as well as monitored risk ingredients. They can already be non-GMO project verified, and then all we're going to need in terms of demonstrating compliance is just proof that they are verified. And the Non-GMO Project has a really great database on their website. So if you want to do a search for verified status ingredients, I'll go into a little bit more in depth later here as well. But if you want to go to their website, you can actually do a search for ingredients that are currently verified. So that's a great way to demonstrate compliance. And of course, they're not subject to the same requirements that other high risk, monitored risk, or low risk ingredients are subject to demonstrate compliance, because they've already gone through the rigorous evaluation process that is non-GMO project verification. So here are the 9 most common high-risk crops. So these are the high-risk crops listed out on the Non-GMO Project website. And so, you as a granola bar manufacturer might say, okay, great, I don't have any of these in my granola bar. It's going to be an easy verification process. And although these are the genetically modified crops listed on the Non-GMO Project standard, more commonly what we see is not, a granola bar containing corn kernels or soybeans in it, but it really comes down to derivatives. So here are some examples of ingredients that are derived from corn. Corn syrup seems pretty obvious. Something like distilled vinegar might seem a little bit less obvious, but distilled vinegar is often produced from corn. Vanilla extract is usually produced by soaking vanilla beans in an ethanol, and that ethanol is often derived from corn. So although those crops are the only ones listed on the Non-GMO Project website, what we more commonly see is, okay, now you're a granola bar manufacturer that uses vanilla extract that actually is considered high risk because of the ethanol used to produce it. Here are a couple other examples of ingredients derived from canola and or soy, things like vegetable oil, soy sauce, margarine. There's many, many, many more examples of derivatives. The Non-GMO Project does have a short list of some derivatives in their standard, but it's important to know that this is not comprehensive. And there are many more high-risk ingredients out there. These are things that we will identify for you and help you work through the compliance requirements and help you figure out what you need to submit to us to demonstrate compliance of these derivatives. But this, I would say, this is almost more common with the exception of maybe, animal feed producers and things like that, to see derivatives in your finished good products, especially a lot of the products that we see getting Non-GMO Project verified, things like granola bars or cereals or beverages or things like that. Flavorings is another example of something that is generally considered high risk because they have ancillary substances in them, things like maltodextrin or alcohol, things like that tend to be derived from high risk crops. Moving on to our next question, how do I demonstrate compliance of high risk ingredients? So when you identify some of these, derivatives of high risk crops, and one thing I failed to mention as well is that there are other high-risk ingredients besides crops. So microbes are considered high risk. There are a lot of genetically modified microbes out there, yeasts and things like that. So we do have to evaluate microbial ingredients and yeast products as well for compliance with the standard because those are commonly genetically modified. So in terms of demonstrating compliance of high risk, and you'll notice here I have major, minor, and micro. And I'll describe what those are in just a minute. But the easiest way to demonstrate compliance of high-risk ingredients, so if you have this vanilla extract in your granola bar, for example, the easiest way to demonstrate compliance of that is going to be to source verified inputs. And this pathway works for major, minor, and micro inputs. And as I mentioned, there's that verified product search on the Non-GMO Project website. So you can go in there and you can type in vanilla, and it will show you all of the verified vanilla extracts that are currently available as Non-GMO Project verified. A little disclaimer, unless they have chosen to not be available on the website. So there is the ability for a company to not want to display their products on the website. So we can't guarantee every single verified vanilla is going to be listed out. But for the most part, if there is a verified vanilla, it's going to be listed out on that website. So this is a really great resource for finding compliant verified ingredients and reducing your amount of work and documentation necessary to demonstrate compliance. There's another compliance pathway called country of origin compliance. This also works for major, minor, and micro inputs. So basically any high risk input in your product is eligible for using this pathway. And this is because there are some countries out there, I always use New Zealand as a great example because they have very, very strict laws regarding cultivation of GM crops. So basically you can assume if a crop is grown in New Zealand, it is not going to be genetically modified because there are federal regulations in place that prohibit cultivation of GM crops in New Zealand. So just for example, if your corn is coming from New Zealand that you're using in your products, it's going to be eligible for this country of origin pathway because we know corn grown in New Zealand will never be genetically modified. Whereas corn grown in the US, for example, 90-something% of all corn grown in the US is genetically modified. So obviously this country of origin pathway won't work. And the technical administrators have been given lists of each country and crop combination. So we can definitely identify situations where this might be eligible for your ingredients as we go through the compliance process. Another way to demonstrate compliance of some high-risk ingredients is IP systems. And it's important to note that this only works for minor and micro inputs. So this is not an eligible pathway for major ingredients. Organic certification is the main way we see demonstrating compliance of this. So if something is a minor or micro input in your product and it's certified organic, then it is going to be compliant. So your corn, for example, if you have corn in your product, or even a corn syrup or something like that, if it's organic certified and it's a minor ingredient in your granola bar, then that organic certification will be the majority of the documentation that we need to demonstrate compliance of that corn syrup. There are a couple other approved systems depending on the nature of the ingredient and product that we have done gap analyses on and are able to work with for IP systems in terms of demonstrating compliance as well. And if you are unable to demonstrate compliance per the above methods, there is a pathway to verification for sampling and testing. So for example, if you're making, let's say, tortillas, and you have corn tortillas that you're producing that you want Non-GMO Project verified, and the corn that you're sourcing, you've been told by the supplier that it's non-GMO, but it's not Non-GMO Project verified. It's grown, let's say, in the US, so it's not eligible for that country of origin pathway, and it's a major ingredient in your products, so it's not eligible for the IP system pathway. You can implement sampling and testing per Section 6 of the Non-GMO Project standard. And again, this standard is publicly available online. We'll work with you through these sampling and testing requirements, but if you want to get an overview, go ahead and pull up that standard and refer to Section 6 to take a look there, and you can sample and test the corn as it comes into your facility to produce these tortillas to basically prove that it is non-GMO. And we'll work with you to set up your sampling and testing plan to make sure that's compliant. And then the final pathway for demonstrating, or it's not demonstrating compliance of high-risk inputs, but one thing to note regarding high-risk inputs and their use in your products, Section 3.1.3 of the Non-GMO Project standards allows for some micro inputs. So again, this pathway is only eligible for micro inputs to be exempt from review. And that means, I think the intention here is, not letting the perfect become the enemy of the good. And we'll go into the ingredient classifications in just a second here, but just for reference, micro ingredients are less than 0.5% of a product formulation by weight, excluding water and salt. So if you have something that is a tiny percentage of your finished good product and you're unable to demonstrate compliance via one of the pathways above for this ingredient, and it's again less than 0.5% of your product, the Non-GMO Project for some ingredients does have this allowance for exemption. And it's important to note that not anything can be exempt. It has to meet some requirements in the standard to be eligible for this exemption pathway. But the Non-GMO Project, I think a good example that we see sometimes is you have a flavor, let's say in your granola bar, going back to that example, that is, the flavor as a whole, let's say, is 0.4% of your product, and maybe it contains a proprietary aromatic that we've asked a bunch of questions about and have been able to demonstrate compliance, and it also contains an ethanol that is, 0.1% of your finished good product by weight, and your flavor supplier says, sorry, we don't have any information on this ethanol for you. We can't get this information, and so therefore you aren't able to demonstrate compliance of that ethanol. And remember, as I said before, ethanol is often derived from corn, and so the mentality of the evaluation process is guilty until proven innocent, or not, or GMO until proven non-GMO. And so because we don't have sufficient information to be able to demonstrate compliance of that ethanol used in the flavor, that is, a total of 0.1% of your product, it can be eligible for this exemption pathway. And it's important to note that any micro inputs, the total of all exempt, must be less than 0.9% of your finished good product, excluding water and salt. So again, this is a very small allowance and only eligible for certain types of specific ingredients, but it is a potential pathway for getting your products verified. And again, if your granola bar contains soybeans in it, or soy crisps or something like that, we're focusing on these ingredients that are comprising 99 in most cases 99.5+% of the products, and making sure those are of non-GMO origin. And there are these very small exemptions to prohibit this ethanol that we can't get information on from preventing your product from becoming Non-GMO Project verified. And here going into ingredient classifications, as I mentioned before, just context on what major, minor, and micro ingredients are. Major is going to be 5% or more of a product formulation. Minor is going to be 0.5 to less than 5% of a product formulation. And micro, again, is less than 0.5% of a product formulation. And it's important to note that you have to subtract water and salt from the calculation before you calculate any of these ingredients out. Great. Next question. What is the facility review? So this is relatively straightforward, I would argue. Once we've demonstrated compliance of all of these ingredients coming into your facility, we want to make sure that your facility has measures in place and systems in place to prevent contamination and trace these ingredients through and make sure that your finished good products are also non-GMO. And so we're going to be looking to see that you have traceability system, so you can trace your finished good product back to lots of ingredients that are used in it to make sure, again, if you're this tortilla manufacturer and you also produce other corn tortillas in your facility with conventional corn, that we're able to follow your finished good non-GMO project verified tortillas back and ensure that you've used your non-GMO corn in these tortillas. Segregation, going with that same example of the tortilla producer who's also producing conventional products, making sure you have measures in place to keep your non-GMO project compliant ingredients separate and segregated from your unevaluated or non-compliant ingredients. If you're using the same machinery to produce non-GMO project verified tortillas and unverified tortillas, we're going to take a look at your cleanout records and protocols in place. And quality management, this involves things like training, record keeping, and just generally making sure that your systems not only exist, but that they are fully utilized by all of your employees and effective as well. And going to the facility on-site inspection, I think this tortilla example is actually a great one to use to illustrate what parallel processing is. And as a reminder, parallel processing is what triggers an on-site inspection. So some of our clients do require on-site visits. And let's use this tortilla manufacturer as an example. So your tortilla manufacturer, you've chosen to sample and test the corn that you are using to produce your corn tortillas. If you also have conventional tortillas in your facility that you're producing, and you have an unevaluated, or that your other corn in your facility is GMO, or you at least don't have the same level of proof that they're non-GMO that you have for your non-GMO project compliant corn, that is called parallel processing. So it's handling another source of a major ingredient in your facility that is unevaluated or not compliant. So we will have to come do that on-site visit. But if you have that sampled and tested corn that you're using for your non-GMO tortillas, and you use that same source of corn to also produce conventional products that you are not labeling as non-GMO project verified, that will remove that requirement because you are no longer parallel processing. So it's having these two different sources, one compliant, one not, of the same major, again, 5% or more of your product formulation, high risk ingredients in your facility. And the final question, why choose SCS Global Services? Why work with us as your technical administrator? Our primary focus is customer service. We have industry-leading turnaround time, and we have trained auditors. We are constantly cross-training auditors across multiple schemes. So that way, if you're doing multiple services with us, you can have one auditor to do those multiple services. So this is something we're always working to improve and expand auditors' auditing services, so that way when there is new combinations of audits coming in, we are equipped to do them. When you work with us, you're going to have a dedicated account coordinator and a dedicated auditor. You will have their phone numbers and their email addresses, so you will be able to call or email them at any time and have direct contact with them at all points during the verification process to answer your questions, explain the forms to you. We usually schedule a 30-minute to 1 hour kind of introduction call at the beginning of each audit with the auditor to go through all of the requirements, to talk about your ingredients, what we're going to need, which ones are high risk, which ones are major, going through all of these requirements in depth so you are very prepared and kind of have some hand holding through the audit. It's not a, submit all of your documents into a portal and you'll receive a yes or a no. It's a human that you are working with, and you will have contact information for them and be able to call or email them whenever you want. And the final reason is we have these auditors trained, and we also offer bundled discounting pricing on all of our services. So we have USDA organic, GFCO gluten-free, SMETA audits, all the GFSI food safety certification programs. And as I mentioned, we're working to train auditors every day to get more unique bundlings of services. But for example, if you sign up with us for Non-GMO Project, USDA organic, and GFCO gluten-free, you're going to be able to work with one auditor for all 3 services. We have auditors who are available to do all 3 of these. So instead of getting 3 audits and 3 visits from 3 different people and coordinating 3 audits every year, you're going to have 1 point of contact, 1 auditor, and 1 audit basically for all 3 of these that can cover all of these components. So not only are the audits bundling, but also the pricing becomes bundled if you are doing more than 1 service with us. I think at this point we can take some time to answer any questions that you have. I also put Ned's contact information back on the screen. He's our Director of Sales and Marketing for our food labeling programs here at SCS, and he can answer any questions you have and help you get started with the process. So again, here's his email and his direct phone number, so he'll be able to help you out. And I think with that, we can take any questions that we have. Okay, we have a couple questions in here. Oops. Okay, so how can overseas clients have their facilities inspected? So we do have auditors in different regions of the world who can conduct on-site inspections should they be necessary. And as I mentioned, for the majority of clients, on-site inspections actually are not required. And so we are able to work with you, via phone calls, emails, and the desk audit portion for the majority of the audit, if not the entirety of the audit. So that makes it much more straightforward for most of our clients. Great, another question. Okay, we have a couple questions, it looks like, specifically directed to Kira for individual. Will slides be sent out to the attendees afterwards? Absolutely. Yes, you will receive a recorded copy of this. How do we contact you? So the best point of contact to work with SCS is Ned's information, which is displayed here. And again, this information will also be sent out to you after. What is the process for switching to a new certifier? Would my ingredient suppliers need to fill out all new documentation, or can we transfer? So we are all auditing, all the different technical administrators audit to the same standard. So generally, documentation that has been completed before that is sufficient for one technical administrator will be sufficient for another. I would say let's contact Ned for this, and he can walk you through kind of next steps and what would be required to make that switch, and also give you a competitive price quote there. If you only have a raw product such as seed, do you need to be Non-GMO Project verified? What about small businesses just starting up? So Non-GMO Project verification is a voluntary verification, and I know, in organic, for example, there are exemptions for operations that make less than $5,000 a year to be able to use the word organic on their products. For Non-GMO Project, you will have to become Non-GMO Project verified should you want to use this logo on your product. And so any product, any agricultural product at least, is eligible for Non-GMO Project verification, or at least going through the process to determining if it's compliant. And so Ned can work with you to set up that process and get started there. My ingredient supplier has labeled as non-GMO project, or is labeled as non-GMO, but is not verified. Can that be used as non-GMO ingredients? So this is a little bit of a tricky one. In general, we cannot accept, as technical administrators, we cannot accept self-made non-GMO declarations from your ingredient suppliers. However, if your ingredient supplier is making that claim, I generally expect that they are making a truthful claim, and we can work to collect what documentation is necessary to gather from this ingredient supplier. So that non-GMO statement alone, unless they are non-GMO Project verified, we cannot accept the non-GMO statement as sufficient to demonstrate compliance of your ingredients. But if the product or ingredient actually is non-GMO, then we can work with them to provide that proof that we need at the technical administrator level to prove compliance of these ingredients. Looks like I've gotten through most of the relevant questions here. Maybe I'll wait another minute or two for any additional questions to come in, and then we can wrap it up. How does a renewal audit differ from an original audit? Is it just in-depth and time-consuming? So generally, we tend to see renewal audits moving a little bit more quickly than initial audits. And mostly that's because you, as the participant, are very familiar with the types of information we're going to need. There are some documents that need to be updated annually and some that do not. So because there are some that do not, that tends to make the process move a little bit faster as well. You're not collecting as many documents every single year as you do in that initial year. Every once in a while, we'll check in with you and make sure there have been no updates to, if there's been no changes to your systems and your procedures in your facility, we don't need you to recomplete all of our facility forms every year. We'll just get confirmation that those are still correct and current. So that tends to make the process move a little bit faster than the initial audit, where you're kind of completing all of these documents, gathering necessary information for the first time, and working with our auditors during some back and forth, determining if things are sufficient. So we do see those renewal audits generally moving faster, with the exception of sometimes when folks are adding additional products and things. And one thing to mention is once your non-GMO project verified, you can add additional products at any point during the process. You don't have to wait till your annual renewal. It's not a once a year type of thing. At any point, you can just contact your auditor that you worked with for your previous verification, and they'll be able to jumpstart that process with you. And we tend to assign the same auditor as often as we can year over year and for product additions, just because they're already familiar with your systems and know you and know what's going on with your products and your ingredients. So that tends to make the process move a little bit faster as well. I have DNA proof from a laboratory for my supplier that the ingredient is non-GMO. What more information is necessary? So depending on the type of ingredient, we might require some more information. For things like low-risk ingredients, generally testing is not required because we are aware that they're not available in a genetically modified form. So for a lot of low-risk ingredients, what we're going to be focusing on is just getting confirmation from the ingredient suppliers that the facility in which they're produced has adequate segregation and chain of custody measures in place to prevent contamination of that low risk input. Once we have that, and then a full ingredients disclosure, sometimes you see your ingredient is blueberries, and then it just so happens to be sweetened with high fructose corn syrup. So we need that full ingredient disclosure so we know whether it is just blueberries or if they're sweetened blueberries and what they're sweetened with, etc. So depending on the type of ingredient, it will not need DNA testing. If you do have DNA testing for a high-risk ingredient, you will want to make sure it's at one of the Non-GMO Project's approved laboratories. Again, a quick Google search or look on their website will find you a list of the approved labs. And you'll want to make sure that it's compliant to a statistically valid sampling and testing plan as described in Section 6 of the standard. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about what that requires, as it is relatively in the weeds and technically complex, but this is something that your auditor can explain to you during the audit, and you can work with them to demonstrate compliance on. Great, and I don't think I see any additional questions here. And if you want, you can feel free to send, if you have additional questions from this webinar, feel free to send them to Ned. Him and I work very closely together. So I'll be able to help him answer. If they're too technical for him, I can definitely jump in and provide an answer as well. So feel free to send any additional questions you have to Ned, and we will be sure to get back to you. And with that, thank you everyone for your time today. Appreciate you coming to, oh, one more question here. I'm not sure I wanted, okay. There's one question here, I'm not sure. It looks like got cut off, but if you want to go ahead and email that question to Ned, we'll be able to get back to you and answer that question. But with that, thank you everyone for your time today. We appreciate you coming to learn more about the Non-GMO Project verification process, SCS, and the Non-GMO Project. With that, have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.